my name is Eric. I'm a Canadian certified counselor up here in Calgary, Alberta, and I do work with folks when it comes to grief support, but I also deal with trauma and addiction and depression, anxiety, when people have a spirit of heaviness, a spirit of anxiousness, all those different parts. So that's a little bit about me. Been in the field for over 14 years. Yeah. I mean, as far as personal experiences, I did have a family member, my dad, who was accidentally buried alive back in 2000. And I will just say that if it was not for a second individual at that site, he would have no doubt been killed by this accident. So the miraculous piece with that personal experience, Daniela, is that he wasn't supposed to have two people there. Like, he went and talked with a man named Jerry, and Jerry had not often been with him digging at this site. So they were digging for Native American artifacts, arrowheads, at a place. And so they actually dig into the ground to get quite deep into the earth to find these artifacts. And Jerry had not really been on a dig before, and he was encouraged by his wife, by Jerry's wife, Lisa, to go. And he went, thankfully. So what happened was, my father was in a hole maybe, I don't know, 8.5, 9 feet deep, and they were digging for these arrowheads, and he had a little dirt come on him, and his other friend that was there, the second friend, Jason, was a little bit further up an incline. Saw that happen, they laughed about it, and then a few seconds later, Daniela, the dirt just caved in on one side, and just totally engulfed my dad. So what happened was, after the dirt very quickly caved in, a big rock, 200, 300 pounds, we're not sure how much kilograms, but it was a big rock, and that fell right on top of the dirt that came in. And so Jason himself was actually injured in his knees because he was buried up to his knees. So Jerry, the third friend, had to race down the hill, get Jerry unearthed, and then Jerry and Jason could find my dad. And my dad was actually buried under a lot of dirt for a matter of minutes. And so his main thought, he told me afterwards, was, I didn't think I would go out this way, which is in direct difference to Jesus, where he knew how he was going to go out. You know, he knew he was going to be crucified. But for my dad, he didn't think he would be dying this way. And yeah, I'm not trying to make any equalization between Jesus and my dad, but just the whole idea of, we usually don't know what's going to happen to us, and this was very much certain. So what happened was, Jerry was able to get the rock off with Jason's help after getting Jason unburied, and then they finally found my dad's head, and he had dirt in all his orifices, you know, his mouth, ears, nose, and they were able to take a rest after that. Then they finally got him fully unburied a little bit later. But yeah, he had ribs that were broken in, had left lung contusion, he had scrapes, bruises, he was having dirt coming out of his body for the next 3 days, even after multiple showers. So thank goodness that his second friend was there. Definitely a miraculous piece, because, well, Jerry wasn't even supposed to be there in the first place. So I actually was able to do a documentary on all three of their experiences. It's interesting the different perspectives they all had with that experience, and I actually have a book coming out in a few months that actually talks about all three of their experiences. So moving over to the professional side, working with grief, I think that grief does not have any expiration date, and I do believe that when people don't have when they don't have any spiritual background, it makes it very difficult to work with them with the grief, but also for them to tap into that part to help them out. So I do talk about spiritual or just secular interventions with folks, and I do enjoy having the opportunity to talk about things that are religious or spiritual when it comes to grief. Hear them out and also give them suggestions for the grief. So we often think, you've probably heard of the DABDA model when it comes to the stages of grief. So now anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and that model in a lot of ways is outdated because that was actually used for people that were terminally ill, that was going through the dying process themselves. We see grief more in the form of task, and so what I do with a lot of folks is I let them know about these different tasks of grief. And one of the final tasks of grief is being able to reinvest in my life, emotionally, spiritually, socially, occupationally, different ways. That does not happen at the beginning, and that is definitely a process that goes back and forth with people. Grief is not a linear process, just like a lot of things in life. It's not like everyone goes through depression or everyone goes through the longing and yearning part of grief. It's different for everybody. So I do a lot of education on what to expect with grief, so to speak. And all grief is complicated, but there is a such thing as complicated grief clinically. And if there is that potential, I will talk with folks about that. That means that they're grieving in a way where it's actually impacting their life financially, socially, occupationally, to their own detriment. And I talk about complicated grief and the symptoms of that, if that's a possibility, or they want to speak about that possibility. What are these small tasks that you can do during the day just to help get yourself through the day? Maybe that's only getting out of bed and taking a shower. Maybe that's getting out of bed and unloading the dishwasher. So it's just finding a game plan for those small tasks if they're having a hard time getting out of bed. Yeah, and people often will think about depression and grief, and there is some overlap, but also there's some differences. Like when it comes to grief, that longing and yearning piece is not often seen with depression. So that's usually a specific part that's connected with grief, that I long or I yearn to be with that person again that I've lost. As far as grief interventions, there's the memory box that I talk with people about. That could be a shoebox or a Tupperware box or anything they want to decorate and make, and they put different parts in that remind them of that person. But that it can also be used for like an abortion, where someone was coerced to have an abortion, where maybe they put in a book of what they would have liked to have read to that child. So different types of items. And there's other interventions as well, like photo narratives. So I can put an album on my phone of this person I've lost, and I can look at those pictures. There's making a music CD list. There's being able to write a letter to that person that I've lost, and then I can burn it later or keep it myself. I can do a verbal letter, if I don't like to type it or write it out. There's journaling that's a part often of, as far as a grief intervention. Walking out in nature and looking for symbols of what or who I've lost. Like this tree is down. That tree was meant to fall down at this time, just like I was meant to lose this person at this time. So getting out in nature can be nice as well. I have been, during my training for grief, there are those statements that I try to watch out for to not say, and nobody's perfect. If I do know the person is a Christian, then I will talk with them about that for sure, like the afterlife. I'll make it more organic and let it come in gradually. Usually it's going to be an open-ended question such as, hey, Daniela, do you believe in life after death, or do you believe in heaven? Oh, yeah, I do. And so what does that mean for you with your loved one? And then let them elicit what it means. Yeah. I do pray for the people that I work with, professionally. I mean, I find it really hard to not believe in something after this life based on like stories like you mentioned, and just the similarities that I've heard from others, and when I've listened to others that have had near-death experiences or being out of the physical body where there's that light that's so vibrant. I mean, it's so amazing. Just reminds me of Paul that went up to the third heaven, out of, whether in the body or out of the body, I'm not sure, but it sounds like it was, his conscience was there. Like there's a consciousness after death. Yeah, amazing testimony. Yeah, my wife's grandmother was a twin as well. And what happened was her grandma did live on until older age, but her twin sister died around age 9. But the interesting thing was, before she died, closely before she passed on, she actually saw an angel in the room, in the area. So I found that now she's reunited with her sister. They're both passed on. So I thought you would find that interesting as a twin. But I asked my brother to stay behind and play with me. We were younger, and if he did not stay behind and play with me, there was a car wreck that happened with my dad, and the way the car wreck happened, it would not have been good for my brother. So who knows? There's those choices that we make, and are they divinely influenced? Perhaps. I mean, there's no such thing as coincidences for Christians. So I believe that there was a part there that was miraculous. But yeah, other than that and that incident with my dad, I can't think of anything that's like supernatural or having a vision. Being able to work with folks and see what they're able to go through and persevere with, in a way I see that as miraculous, what people are able to experience. And I have had people talk about their own spiritual experiences with me. So, yeah, it's definitely a process, and it's been so rewarding to see people come back into their own and reconnect with themselves and others, and if they do believe in God and a higher power, then that as well. Yeah, it's hard to describe seeing that whole process unfold. Even seeing someone that decided not to die by suicide because they felt like they had a connection with me, and that actually did happen once, where someone decided not to use pills in an occasion, and they decided to live. And I don't just attribute that to me, but I mean, they were doing the work as well. So yeah, so I mean, there's definitely something to be said when it comes to resilience and perseverance, and just the amount of fortitude people can have going through these losses. What parts of that person do you want to keep, and what parts do you might want to let go of? Maybe there's certain parts that, certain memories or certain personality traits are like, yeah, I don't want to necessarily remember that, but I want to remember their generosity or their love or their way of doing things in life. A part of grief work is allowing someone to process those feelings for acceptance that this is going to go the way that it's going to go, and that's okay.